Hello class, we are group 2 and our presentation is on Japan and climate change. This presentation is brought to you by Infinity, Elaine, Rachel, Robert, Sean, Jasmine, and Julian. Thank you for watching.
To start things off, let's learn a little bit more about Japan through a country analysis.
Lifestyle. Japanese are proud people and they hold their families to high standards. Traditionally, the hierarchy in the household is the father, that follows by the mother, the eldest child, and then the youngest. The father was usually the main breadwinner and protector of the household, while the mother would stay home, care for the children. These days, the hierarchy has relaxed a bit. One of the biggest is that the growth of the population has exponentially slowed down over the years, with more and more women choosing not to have children at all. Most of the families across Japan nowadays reside within the main city areas in small apartment units. Their elderly grandparents likely reside in the countryside, and they visit them most likely a few times a year. The opportunities presented in cities are vast and limitless for young children, but this comes as a sacrifice on the traditions of Japan that will likely be kept by their grandparents.
Next up, we will be talking about major cities and attractions in the country of Japan. First, we will be starting off with the city of Sapporo. The city is the site of the famous Sapporo Snow Festival, an event held each February showcasing an array of marvelous ice and snow sculptures that is visited by about 2 million people each year. Athletic types can visit the Sapporo Winter Sports Museum, which showcases the legacy of the 1972 Winter Olympics, or they can hit the slopes skiing or snowboarding in one of the ski resorts near Sapporo. And of course, not to be missed is Sapporo's delectable seafood cuisine, revered throughout Japan. Next, we have Tokyo. Tokyo is arguably Japan's most well-known city. The Tokyo metropolis is made up of 23 special wards, home to upwards of 35 million people. It is also known for having the world's busiest pedestrian crossing, known as Shibuya Scrambled Crossing, and what many would say is the busiest train station in the world in Shinjuku. Next, we have Yokohama. Yokohama lies south of Tokyo on the scenic western coast of Tokyo Bay. It is known for being Japan's first port that officially opened to foreign trade in 1859. It's not a stretch to say that international influences have shaped Yokohama's character, from the city's signature brick architecture to the famous Yokohama Chinatown that was formed by Chinese immigrants who settled in the 1800s. Next we have Nagoya. Nagoya has long been the center of Japan's automotive and aviation manufacturing, as well as a technological hub with a growing robotics industry. Visitors can explore Nagoya's tech-centric side by visiting the Nagoya City Science Museum. In recent years, Nagoya has gained international fame for being the location of the World Cosplay Summit, where cosplayers from 20 nations worldwide compete in the World Cosplay Championship and participate in one of Japan's most impressive cosplay parades. Next, we have Hiroshima. Hiroshima is the site where the first atomic bomb was dropped in 1945. Soon after, the city was also devastated by the Makurazaki typhoon. Despite this tragedy, Hiroshima has since been rebuilt. Many demolished monuments were reconstructed, as well as new ones, reflecting its status as a city of peace, which was proclaimed by the Japanese parliament in 1949. One thing that's not mentioned on here is Mount Fuji. It is between Tokyo and Yomaha. Question: which city in Japan and arguably is the most well known? A. Sapporo, B. Nagoya, C. Tokyo, D. Hiroshima, or E. Yokohama? I'll give you a couple of seconds to answer. The answer is C. Tokyo. Japan's uniqueness. Japan is unique because its metro is something from the future. When you travel on their trains, you'll feel like you're in the future. And if you're from the United States, you'll begin to wonder what went wrong with the US rail system. Japan is unique because everyone plays video games. A big misconception about Japan is that they aren't religious or highly spiritual. This couldn't be further from the truth. Their dedication to prayer and religion is unique, and you'll find temples and shrines in almost every part of the country. The language of Japan is very unique, but it's also extremely hard to master. Japan is unique because they integrate technology into their society faster than almost anywhere else. There might not be a place on this planet that oozes technology like Japan. At least in the cities like Tokyo and Osaka, you can see technology in every corner, from the buttons of a toilet to the streets glowing with neon signs. Other things that's unique about Japan is that it's super safe. Japan is unique because it's literally one of the safest places in the world. It's the closest to utopia a society on this planet will ever get to. On any given school day, upon walking the streets of major cities in Japan, you will hear the peaceful jingling of bells near you on the street. One more thing about the uniqueness of Japan is that everything is healthier. Japan is unique because they place a real effort on being healthy. Japan's average life expectancy is close to 85 years old, while the United States come in about 78 years. Overall, you will see the retired population far more active in Japan, and therefore you will see the older generation socializing and exercising regularly alongside young people in the park. Question: is the Japanese language hard to learn? True or false? The answer is A, true.
Japanese history. Japan was settled 35,000 years ago by Paleolithic people from the Asian mainland at the end of the Ice Age, around 10,000 years ago. A culture called the Jomon developed. This included hunter-gatherers, clothing, wooden houses, and clay vessels. The second settlement of people were the Yayoi people, which contributed metalworking, rice cultivation, and weaving to Japan. Buddhism came to Japan during the Asuka period 538-710, as did the Chinese writing system. At this time, society was divided into clans. The first strong central government developed during the Nara period 710 to 794. Agriculture villagers followed Shintoism. Japan's unique culture developed rapidly during the Heian era 794 to 1185. The imperial court turned out to be enduring of art, poetry, and prose. The samurai warrior class developed at this time as well. Samurai lords called shogun took over the government in 1185 and ruled Japan in the name of the emperor until 1868. The Kamakura shogunate 1185 to 1333 ruled much of Japan from Kyoto, aided by two miraculous typhoons. Kamura repelled attacks by Mongol armades in 1274 and 1281. Japanese history continued. A particularly strong emperor, Go-Daigo, tried to overthrow the shogunate in 1331, resulting in a civil war between competing northern and southern courts that finally ended in 1392. During this time, a class of strong regional lords called daimyo increased in power. Their rule lasted through the end of the Edo period, also known as the Tokugawa shogunate, in 1868. That year, a new constitutional monarchy was established, headed by the Meiji Emperor. The power of the shoguns came to an end. After the Meiji Emperor's death, the emperor's son became the Taisho Emperor. His chronic illness kept him away from his duties and allowed the country's legislature to introduce new democratic reforms. During World War I, Japan formalized its rule over Korea and seized control of northern China. The Showa Emperor Hirohito oversaw Japan's aggressive expansion during World War II, its surrender, and its rebirth as a modern industrialized nation.
Education system. The Japanese school system primarily consists of 6-year elementary schools, 3-year junior high schools, and 3-year high schools, followed by a 2 or 3-year junior college or 4-year college. Compulsory education lasts for 9 years through elementary and junior high school. School exchanges during Japanese educational travel are mainly implemented in junior high and high schools. For physically or mentally challenged students, there is a system called special needs education to support special students to develop their self-reliance and thus enhance their social participation. Public schools in Japan have classes 5 days a week from Monday to Friday. There are also schools that have classes on Saturday. In junior high and high schools, there are 6 class periods each day, typically lasting 50 minutes for each. After class, students clean the classrooms in shifts and then start their club activities. English is a compulsory subject in junior high and high schools. There are also elementary schools that introduce English education from intermediate grade classes. In some high schools, apart from English, students are also allowed to take courses in Chinese, Korean, French, German, and other languages. Student clubs are a characteristic part in Japan's school education. Under teachers' guidance, students with the same interests in sports, cultural activities, or fields of study voluntarily gather together after classes and on days off. There are also numerous student clubs revolving around Japanese traditional sports and culture, such as judo, kendo, sado, and other activities. Club activities also provide students with the chance to participate in schools exchange and friendly matches.
Higher education in Japan. Higher education in Japan begins after a total of 12 years of primary education have been completed, 6 years in elementary school, and 3 years respectively in both lower and upper secondary schools. The percentage of 18-year-old Japanese students enrolling in universities and junior colleges have begun to increase since the Second World War. 50% as of now. It would be 70% if specialized schools were included. It can be assumed that Japan has entered a stage of universal access to higher education. There are approximately 780 universities in Japan, of which 80% are private. There are also specialized schools and colleges that provide more vocational types of degrees. The most known university of Japan is called Tohoku University, recognized for its outstanding standards in education and research. It is located in Sendai, Japan. Universities are divided into 3 categories: national universities established by the Japanese government, public universities established by local public entities, and private universities established by educational corporations. Now we have a question check. One of the first questions that I'm going to be asking is regards to education. Higher education begins after how many years of primary education? 13, 8, 10, or 12? The correct answer is 12. Government. Japan's constitution was promulgated in 1946 and came into force in 1947, superseding the Meiji Constitution of 1889. The Constitution differs from the earlier document in 2 fundamental ways: the principle of sovereignty and the stand aim of maintaining Japan as a peaceful and democratic country in perpetuity. The emperor, rather than being the embodiment of all sovereign authority, as he was previously, is the symbol of the state and of unity of the people, while sovereign power rests with the people, whose fundamental human rights are explicitly guaranteed. The government is now based on a constitution that stipulates the separation of powers between the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. Legislative powers are vested in the Diet, which is popularly elected and consists of 2 houses. The House of Representatives, or lower house, ultimately takes precedence over the House of Councilors, or upper house, in the matters of passing legislation, controlling the budget, and approving treaties with foreign powers. Japanese healthcare system. Citizens of Japan are known to have longer life expectancy than anyone else, most likely because of the country's healthcare services. Japan offers two public healthcare options to their citizens. The first one known as SHI, also known as Social Health Insurance. This type of insurance is offered to those who are employed full-time with a medium or large company. A percentage of 5% is deducted out of salaries to pay for SHI, and employers match the cost. For those who do not qualify under SHI, receive another type of insurance called NHI, also known as National Health Insurance. The people who qualify for this type of insurance are self-employed individuals and extends to those who work for small businesses and the unemployed. The amount that they pay is based on their income. The Japanese government pays for 70% of healthcare costs, which includes medical appointments, hospital visits, and prescriptions. The patients then pay the remaining 30%.
Demographics. The current population of Japan is 125,703,372. Unlike many other countries around the world today, the population of Japan appears largely homogeneous, with the final population stats comprised of 98.5% contribution from ethnic Japanese people. In addition, there is a very small proportion of foreign workers living in Japan, largely made up of Koreans, Chinese, Peruvians, and Brazilians. The largest native ethnic group in Japan is the Yamato people, although large minority groups include the indigenous Ryukyuan and Ainus people. The country has traditionally rejected the need to recognize ethnic differences in Japan, and former Japanese Prime Minister Taro Iso once described the country as one of one nation, one civilization, one language, one culture, and one race. Japan is currently the world's oldest country, and it's set to get even older. The number of elderly people aged 65 or older accounts for 26.7% of the 125 million total population, up 3.7 percentage points from 5 years ago.
Around 98.5% of the population is made up of ethnic Japanese. While most speak Nihongo, Japan has several languages, many of which are mutually unintelligible. There is no existing law that establishes that Nihongo is the official language of Japan. Japanese is greatly influenced by the Chinese language and Chinese characters, which is evident in the kanji Chinese characters still being used today. Modern Japanese borrowed many words from other foreign languages. It still uses Chinese numerals mixed with Arabic numerals. Several languages or dialects in Japan include the Ryukyuan language, Ainu language, the Orok language, and the Nivik language. These languages belong to two language families spoken in Japan, the Japonic language and the Ainu language. The Ainu language have three dialects. Two languages, Shakolon Ainu and Kro Ainu, are already extinct. Only the Hokkaido Ainu language remains.
Now, let's talk about business in Japan.
In Japan, Japanese see work as holy and honorable. They're loyal to their employees, peers, and groups. They serve customers till satisfaction with high-quality products. They also believe in Kaizen, continuous improvement of process, products, operations, decision-making, and strategy. They also prefer a transcendental normative work setting. Etiquette in Japanese culture. Agent status. Respect for agent status is very important in Japanese culture. With hierarchy affecting all aspects of social interactions, the Japanese are most comfortable interacting with somebody they consider their equal. Business cards. The exchange of business cards, miishi, is an essential part of initial meetings in Japanese and follows strict protocol. While standing, you should politely hand a business card over with two hands and receive one in return. A slight bow as a form of respect when exchanging is usually performed. Do not simply drop the card into a pocket. Instead, take a few seconds to review names and titles, commenting on them if the time permits. Japanese names. As in many parts of Asia, Japanese family names come first and are followed by the given name. For example, if someone is introduced as Tanakana Hiroshi, Tanakana is the family name and Hiroshi is the given name. Bowing and handshakes. Bowing is an important part of everyday life in Japan, including in business contexts. Japanese bow to those senior to them as a greeting and a show of respect. Building relationships. Japan is a more relationship-oriented culture than Australia, particularly when it comes to doing business. Japanese want to know and trust someone before they do business with them. Dress code. Appearance is very important, and Japanese people tend to dress more formally than Australians. Business attire is conservative, with an emphasis on comfy rather than individual expression. Modesty. Japanese culture values modesty and humility. Speaking in a quiet tone and not gesticulating too much will go some way towards giving a modest, calm, and humble impression.
Next up, we have economy. Economy. Japan's economic freedom score is 69.9, making this economy the 35th freest in the 2022 index. Japan is ranked 6th among 39 countries in the Asia-Pacific region, and its overall score is above the regional and world averages. Economic growth in Japan slowed to zero in 2019, turned negative in 2020, and rebounded in 2021. Economic freedom had been expanding slowly, but with higher scores from property rights and judicial effectiveness just barely outpacing declines in the business freedom and labor freedom, Japan has managed to record only a 0.3 point overall gain of economic freedom since 2017 and is currently at the top of the moderately free category. Japan's economy was the world's second largest behind the US from 1968 until 2010, when it was overtaken by China. From the 1960s to the 1980s, Japan achieved one of the highest economic growth rates in the world. This growth was led by higher rates of investment in productive plant and equipment, the application of efficient industrial techniques, a high standard of education, good relations between labor and management, ready access to leading technologies and significant investment in research and development, an increasingly open world trade framework, and a large domestic market of discerning consumers, which has given Japanese businesses an advantage in their scale of operations.
Laws in Japan are a bit different than in America. Japan is ranked number 29 in the World Bank for doing business, making them a desirable country for businesses to expand to. Most of Japan's workforce is unionized, and a company that has more than 10 employees are required to develop and implement work rules. Japan also has an aging workforce. Unfortunately, Japanese society has produced fewer children and is rapidly aging, leaving the workforce unstable for economy growth. Currently, the government is aiming to raise salaries, hoping to encourage younger people to work. Overtime is usually expected in Japan, as they endure some of the longest standard work weeks, causing concern for karoshi, death or illness from being overworked. Because of this, the employment laws have changed to a maximum of 40 hours a week and 8 hours a day, unless improved by employee and employer to work overtime. Aside from long work hours, Japanese are committed to a work-life balance that include bylaws that state mother and father can take leave at the same time for up to a year after birth. Vacation leave is also based on seniority and can accrue up to 23 days a year. Healthcare in Japan is mandated by the employer and the employer is responsible for healthcare coverage, pension, and unemployment insurance. They are also required to provide annual physicals and checkups, and in some cases, even stress evaluations. Japanese laws also make it extremely difficult to be fired. Some cases are without question, but majority of the time, employers are forced 2 periods of probation rather than being fired. An employee is very difficult and usually ends in a probation rather than a termination. A, true, or B, false? The answer is A, true.
Next, we have important global businesses located in the country of Japan. Japan has a lot of businesses that is located in their country, but here's the top 5. Number 1, we have Toyota Motor. Second, we have SoftBank. Third, we have Sony. Next, we have Nippon Telegraph and Telephone. And last, we have Mitsubishi UFJ Financial Group.
Next, let's talk about exports and imports.
Japanese exports are equivalent to about 16% of the GDP. Key exports include vehicles, machinery, and manufactured goods. Japan's major export destinations are the United States, equivalent to 20.2%, China, equivalent to 17.5%, and the Republic of Korea, about 7%. Japanese have fewer natural resources, and its agriculture is heavily protected. Although Japan's exports are a little sluggish due to a weak yen, they are still Australia's second largest trading partner, with 60.3 billion in goods in 2015 and 16. Who is Japan's number 2 trade partner? A, Dublin, B, Australia, C, North Korea, or D, America? The answer is B, Australia. Japan are mineral fuels, machinery, and food. Leading suppliers are China at 25.6%, the United States at 10.9%, and Australia at 5.6%. Imports from Japan include passenger vehicles and refined petroleum, making them the third largest source of imports to Australia, producing about $5.2 billion in trade in 2015-2016.
Let's talk a little bit about Japan's pop culture.
Sports. Sumo. One of the most famous and well-known of the Japanese sports is sumo. Sumo is essentially a wrestling sport, but the rules are a bit different from Western-style wrestling. Usually the match begins when both wrestlers put both hands on the ground and ends when one player is pushed out of the ring or a part of their body other than the soles of their feet touches the ground. Kendo, the way of the sword, is another traditional sport in Japan, essentially similar to fencing. Kendo has influences and sword practices of the samurai. Kendo comes from kenjutsu, which is a type of sword-based training and fighting that came from samurais. Judo, the gentle way, is another martial arts that has also become globally known due to its presence in the Olympics. Judo is a form of wrestling that runs on the principle of self-defense. Yabusame, the Japanese art of archery, and does it on horseback. Being able to shoot a bow and arrow on horseback was done in samurai battles and was a highly esteemed skill to have. Karate, traditional Japanese sport, another martial art, and one of the best known out of the martial arts. Karate uses striking maneuvers of the hands and feet.
Hayao Miyazaki is an animation director who creates entertaining plots, compelling characters, and breathtaking animation films. His first film was released in 1986, Castle in the Sky, and has since become to be known one of the greatest animation directors in Japan. Ken Watanabe. As a renowned Japanese actor, Ken Watanabe is better known for playing tragic heroes in film. He has earned an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, Japanese Academy Film Prize for Best Actor twice, and he also played Dr. Serizawa in the Godzilla movies here in the United States. Hiroki Sanada is a famous Japanese actor. Sanada started his career at an early age of 5, and as an established Japanese actor, he is most known for his action films. Haruki Murakami is a prolific Japanese writer who has received numerous awards like the World Fantasy Award, the Frank O'Connor International Short Story Award, the Franz Kafka Prize, and the Jerusalem Prize. This established writer's works have also been translated into 50 different languages, selling millions of copies outside of Japan. Shinichi Kagawa is a professional football player who has been signed with many countries. He is also known as the first Japanese player to ever play in the Premier League. Yoko Ono is most known for her marriage to John Lennon. She is also a conceptual artist, an avant-garde musician, and a peace activist. Marie Kondo is an organizing expert who applies a Japanese approach to keeping a home organized. She is better known for her best-selling book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, the Japanese Art of Decluttering and Organizing. Mari Asaka is a professional tennis player who plays for Japan with her sister, Naomi Osaka. They have been compared to Serena and Venus Williams, but unfortunately her career has slowed due to injuries. Naoko Takeuchi is a manga artist who is known for creating Sailor Moon, one of the most popular manga comics of all time. She has also written lyrics for some of the most popular anime songs. Arika Kurosawa is a film director who has directed more than 30 films in his career that has spanned over 57 years. Starting in 1936, Kurosawa is known for being one of the most important influential filmmakers of the history of cinema.
Food of Japan. Sushi is the most known Japanese food around the world. It is offered in various ways and prices. Unagi, or eel, is a fish known to be found in mainly rivers. In Japan, it is a delicacy typically in a high-class Japanese dining. Tempura is a dish involving ingredients like seafood, meat, and vegetables covered in batter and deep-fried in oil. Onigiri, or rice balls, is also called musubi, may just look like plain rice, but they often have a savory filling inside and are wrapped with salty sheets of nori seaweed. Miso soup is another famous Japanese food, renowned for its great taste and health benefits. The soup is conventionally drunk, accompanied by other side and main dishes. A traditional Japanese diet generally includes drinking miso soup daily. Ramen is a Japanese noodle soup. It consists of Chinese-style wheat noodles served in a meat or fish-based broth, often flavored with soy sauce or miso, and uses toppings such as sliced pork, nori, nima, and scallions.
Now we move on to the art industries in Japan.
Art. Japanese art has a long history as much as the culture of the country of the rising sun, which starts from the beginning of human settlements in about 10,000 BC to the present. The Japanese art includes a wide range of styles and means of expression, including ceramics, sculpture, painting, and calligraphy on silk and paper, the ukiyo-e, wood block prints, origami, and more recent manga, along with a myriad of other types of artwork. Music. Japanese music, the art concerned with combining vocal or instrumental sounds for beauty of form or emotional expression, specifically as it is carried out in Japan. Korea served as a bridge to Japan for many Chinese musical ideas, as well as exerting influence through its own forms of court music. J-pop, an abbreviation for Japanese pop, is a loosely defined musical genre that entered the musical mainstream of Japan in the 1990s. J-pop has its roots in 1960s pop and rock music such as the Beatles, which 70s rock bands fused with Japanese music. Japanese idol music artists are significant part of the market, with girl groups and boy bands regularly topping the singles charts. This includes boy band Arashi, which had the best-selling singles of 2008 and 2009, and girl group AKB48, which have had the best-selling singles each year since 2010. Now we move on to the film industry. Watching movies at theaters is a popular pastime in Japan. Historically, the 1950s are usually regarded as the golden age of Japanese cinema, with works such as Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai and Yasuhiro Ozu's Tokyo Story being released during this time, and the most successful years seeing more than 1 billion annual admissions to theaters. Japan is one of the largest film markets in the world. The country is home to a high number of affluent consumers as well as a highly developed media economy that can produce entertaining content and distribute it to audiences around the world. The history of anime can be traced back to the start of the 20th century, with the earliest verifiable films dating back to 1907. Before the advent of film, Japan already had a rich tradition of entertainment with colorful painted figures moving across a projection screen. Yurushi, a particular Japanese type of magic lantern show popular in the 19th century. Some notable movies can be found here that are listed 1 through 4, which are called Late Spring 1949, Ikiru 1952, Eijutsu 1953, and Seven Samurai 1954. The film business can be divided into 3 stages: production, distribution, and exhibition. In Japan, it is not uncommon for one company to do all 3 stages. Filmmaking in Japan has largely been dominated by the big 4 film companies, Toho, Shochiku, Toei, and Kadokawa, which are also involved in the 3 segments.
Climate change. This is the global leadership issue that we decided to focus on because it does not only affect the leaders of today, the leaders in command today, but it also affects the leaders of tomorrow, the leaders of the future. And whether those future leaders may know it or not, actions, policies, and decisions that are being made by the leaders of today will be dealt with in the future, and the consequences won't be dealt with until the future leaders are in power. So this is why we decided to choose this topic, because it is an important one for leaders of today and leaders of the future. You may be asking yourself, what is climate change? A good definition would be a change in global or regional climate patterns, in particular a change apparent from the mid to late 20th century onwards and attributed largely to the increased levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide produced using fossil fuels. Climate change leads to an increase in temperature and a change in pattern of precipitation. So not only does it affect the air, but it also affects the precipitation. Greenhouse gas emissions are the leading cause of climate change. A good example or a large emitter of greenhouse gases is a vehicle or your vehicle. Your vehicle takes in fossil fuels, it takes in gas, oil, and it helps your vehicle run. It's essential for your vehicle to run, but in the process, it emits greenhouse gases. It emits carbon dioxide that only goes into the air and isn't used for in any other way. It just goes into the air and warms the globe and affects the climate change. Another good example that I personally did not know is the use of land changing. That is also an emitter of greenhouse gases. And you can think of it as a untouched land or a forest, a jungle, whatever the case may be. Something natural with plants and that ecosystem, changing from that to a new building or a new parking lot. That process is also an emitter of greenhouse gases, not to mention the vehicles or the machinery that is used on the site, but also the process of cutting down those trees, from those trees taking in carbon dioxide and producing oxygen, that process is no more. So now there's just more carbon dioxide in the air instead of being taken in by those trees and producing oxygen. So that is a huge emitter of greenhouse gases. After the 1850s, I'm sorry, the temperatures have just been rising more and more over the decades. The world or the globe has been recording warmer temperatures since that time, since the 1850s, and each year or each decade it gets warmer and warmer. An excess of greenhouse gas emissions result in a change in temperature affecting the natural state of the environment and the air. This is why we chose climate change, because it affects more than just us. It affects the nature, the environment, the air, and the other species that we share this planet with. And so we just wanted to make sure that the future leaders of tomorrow know how important it is to affect and attack this climate change and this process and this issue. Japan and climate change. So Japan plays a large role in climate change, not only being emitters of this carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases, but also taking action towards it. Even the former Prime Minister of Japan, Yoshihide Suga, declared Japan would be carbon neutral by 2050. In 2018, the Environment Ministry reported that annual temperatures recorded in Japan are rising faster than the global average, meaning that they are doing something different, not necessarily good, that is causing their temperatures to rise a lot faster than the global average. Severe weather in Japan has inclined the country's leaders to act on climate change, and the reason that is because this severe weather affects their economy. And one of those severe weather situations is typhoons. They affect their economy, their agriculture, their fishing, their tourism. And a country's success can sometimes be measured by the economy. So they want to make sure they're attacking this issue and doing whatever they can to make sure their economy is good and making sure that they're taking care of the future leaders and the people of today.
As temperatures increase, water evaporates more rapidly. This, in turn, makes rain fall less frequently, but harder when it does. Given that Japan, the average temperature is rising faster than the global average, this process is expected to continue escalating. Climate change is hindering the production of this vital grain throughout Japan. Even though the quantity grown has remained the same in many regions, the combination of hotter temperatures and higher CO2. Takuya Nomoto, an Environment Ministry official, noted at a 2013 symposium that climate experts were predicting the country's average temperature would rise between 2.1 and 4 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. The rise will bring severe weather patterns, including heavier rains and floods, which is predicted to affect Japan's most basic crop, rice. Each member of the country's 126 million population consumes an average of over 50 kg of rice per year. Higher CO2 concentrations can decrease the actual quality of the grain, making it increasingly fragile and less nutritious than before. With Japan being the fifth largest producer of carbon emissions, it is vital for the contribution to reach carbon neutrality by 2050 because the leaders of tomorrow will have to overcome the inherited burden imposed on them by the leaders of today. Addressing Japan's parliament, Mr. Suga called for the country to be carbon neutral in 2050, a declaration that drew loud applause from lawmakers. Achieving that goal will be good not only for the world, he said, but also for Japan's economy and global standing. Mr. Suga also said that taking an aggressive approach to global warming will bring out a transformation in our industrial structure and economic system that will lead to big growth in the economy. However, Japan isn't the only one contributing to climate change. This is a global issue. The unique window into the future afforded by our growing understanding of the environmental crisis means that future leaders can and must try to be better prepared to deal with these challenges. To accommodate future population and economic growth, new methods are required for the development of alternative sources of energy supply to reduce global reliance on oil and conventional coal, including greater use of nuclear energy and hydroelectric power even while promoting the use of non-fossil fuels and renewable sources of energy. This is why destabilization must sit at the heart of how future leaders can be better prepared for the challenges of tomorrow.
Here we have our list of sources.